Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for this last day of the BWC PIP National Meeting. I'm Rachel Johnston, and I'm the BWC TTA Program Manager. On today's agenda, we have presentations about performance management, digital evidence management, and concurrent sessions on body-worn cameras in travel jurisdictions as well as in correctional settings. After that, we'll hear about the evolution of body-worn cameras, followed by closing thoughts from our leadership. This next session is BJA performance measurement with Amy December. Thank you for your attention, and I'm going to turn it over to our presenter. Amy?
Okay, well, sorry about that. Hopefully it's better now. Feel free to chat if it gets noisy again. Good afternoon. My name is Amy December. I'm a research analyst on the BJA Planning, Performance, and Impact team. So today I'll be discussing the performance measures, the reporting reporting process. So this is just the general agenda for what I'll be going over for today's training. I'll start by reviewing the purpose and importance of the performance measures. Next, I'll go over the questionnaire structure and what to expect or reporting. Then we'll cover some common challenges experienced and some tips for success when you are reporting your performance measures. And then I'll end with a brief preview of previously reported data to give you a sense of how BJA uses these data and some resources for you to reach out to whenever you might be having questions while you're reporting. And then I'll have plenty of time at the end for question and answers. But of course, if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to put them in the chat or let me know. I'm happy to answer them as I go. Okay, so this first section is the training by the overview of the performance measures and the reporting process. So the performance measures or performance management simply refers to the process of collecting and analyzing data as it relates to performance. So in this case, it's data as it relates to the performance of grantees who have received body-worn camera grants. This graphic kind of introduces the types and process of performance measures that we use to track progress towards the body-worn camera goals and help identify areas of improvement along the way. So on the far left, you'll see the inputs column. Inputs refers to program resources. This can be grant funding, such as asking you about how you've allocated your program funds or different program activities or personnel you've used the program funds towards, or also program administration, like the types of cross-sector partnerships or community participation you've been engaging in as part of the grant. Secondly, the activities column, these are actions that help convert your inputs into outputs that will eventually provide measurable progress towards the program goals. For example, these could be things like trainings, meetings, partnership development, data analysis, strategic planning, those types of things. So we might ask you if you've implemented new policies or procedures as part of your grant activity during a reporting period, or if you've purchased body-worn cameras, or if you've hired staff to help support your body-worn camera programs. Those are all examples of activities that we may ask you about as part of the performance measures questionnaire. That third column is the outputs column. So these are accountable or measurable products or services that result from the actions that you've taken. So this could be the assignment of program cameras to officers in the field. It could also be things like data management, tracking, analysis, or new officers that have been identified to be eligible for body-worn cameras. Again, our performance measures questionnaire will also ask questions about these types of outputs. And then finally, outcomes. These speak to the larger program goals, the measurable progress towards your goals, and the associated outcomes that have kind of resulted from the activity during the award period. So this could be examples of this could be an increase in the percentage of officers equipped with body-worn cameras, or if it's a goal of your program to reduce the number of use of force reports as a result of the body-worn cameras. So these outcome sections are usually reported during towards the end of the performance questionnaire to help you understand your progress towards the program goals as a whole. And so performance management also helps BJA and its grantees understand their progress towards these key goals and objectives. So we use these measures to accomplish opportunity for improvement, including internal training and technical assistance and external messaging. By answering these questions on a quarterly basis, it's under both you as the grantee as well as us at BJA understand your progress towards your goals, or if you're experiencing any challenges, ways in which BJA can provide technical or training and technical assistance or other types of support. Certainly, it helps track activity and progress, which can help inform decision making. As I mentioned, you'll report information such as your program goals and the progress towards that. It helps you identify if you need to make adjustments or change the course of your grant reporting so that you can make sure you achieve the goals and progress laid out in the performance measures. Third, it helps BJA to understand how funds are being distributed. This can help inform budgets, strategic plans, and future funding. It also enables BJA to respond to external requests such as congressional inquiries or media requests. Sorry, my dog's barking around. And so by reporting on your progress, it helps us understand the program as a whole and how the funds are being distributed and used on a regular basis. And then finally, it allowed us to comply simply with the law and the Government Performance and Results Modernization Act. Performance must be beneficial to you as grantees. In many of the states, it's beneficial to BJA. So first of all, as I mentioned, it helps grantees identify areas for improvement and focus on internal efforts. This process can help you reflect on what you've accomplished during the reporting period and also about what you want to aim to accomplish as you move forward and make adjustments as needed. Second, the performance questionnaire provides you an opportunity to proactively request training and technical assistance in order to address challenges you might be experiencing. Third, it generates evidence of progress towards program goals, which can also enhance resource advocacy and sustainability. So all of these areas, as you work through the questionnaire, can be things to help you reflect and ensure that you are progressing towards your program goals as efficiently and effectively as possible. And if you are experiencing challenges or need support, it provides you a way in which you can connect with BJA to express those needs. So another way that BJA, another benefit of the performance measures reports is that it allows us to generate a variety of reports from the performance measure data. For example, these two screenshots here can give you an example of some annual program reports that we've created using the data from the performance measures. So for example, the one on the right is actually a body-worn camera report. So these types of reports help provide high-level summary of grantee activity and the achievements of the program at that kind of larger level. They also allow us to highlight program accomplishments by using both the quantitative and qualitative program measures. And these types of reports often get posted to BJA's website, which can be available to a variety of audiences, including BJA leadership, DOJ leadership, Congress, and even the general public. And so grantees currently report into the PMT, which stands for the Performance Management Tool. The website houses the questionnaire that OJP uses and that grantees must complete every quarter. We link to the website here, so I believe this will be made available so you can access this website directly. And just so that you know, we will be transitioning to a new system called Just Grants in the near future, but until that's rolled out, you will continue to report into the PMT. So the PMT questionnaire includes both numerical performance measures as well as narrative questions. So the numerical measures are completed quarterly, where the narrative questions are answered semi-annually for the previous 6 months of activity. We'll talk more about the schedule and specifics of the questionnaire as we move on, but I also want to point out that at the end of your grant award period, grantees are given 30 days the end of their last reporting period to meet their final PLPT. This includes kind of a final report questions that you'll answer just the one time at the closeout of your grant, and also submit a final report to BJA as an attachment to the report. So this table outlines the reporting schedule, including the types of data you'll be reporting each reporting period, when the reports are due into the system, and whether or not you need to provide an upload of the report to Just Grants. So the first column highlights the quarterly reporting periods, which align with the fiscal quarters. The second column outlines the type of data you'll be reporting during each reporting period. As you can see from the alternating information in the second column, you'll only report the narrative questions in January and July, and you'll report the quantitative performance measures every reporting period regardless. The third column provides you of the actual due date of when you need to submit your performance measures. So as I mentioned, you get 30 days at the end of a reporting period to actually submit. And then the final column shows you whether or not that report should be uploaded to Just Grants in support of your performance measures. So it is important to note the last row of this table shows you your last reporting period of the award. This is when you're closing out your grant award. At that time, you'll provide the performance measures responses, your responses to the narrative questions, as well as those specific questions that relate to the closeout. You have 30 days to report those after the end of your last reporting period, so whenever that may fall for you, and you do also submit a report 30 days after the reporting period. So we also summarized kind of the most important piece of information is when the due date of each of the reporting periods falls, kind of on that next to the infographic on the left. So just as a reminder, they're due on January 30th, April 30th, July 30th, and October 30th. And the asterisk next to April and October due dates is an indication that reports are also due to be uploaded into Just Grants at that time. And so next we can talk about the structure of the questionnaire and the types of questions you can anticipate. So as mentioned earlier in the training, the questions PMT are of two main categories. The first is a program performance measures questions, which are quantitative data on the program activities during that reporting period. This can typically is things that are going to be whole numbers, not decimals, no text, and will be answers to questions such as how many dollars were spent on equipment during the prior reporting period, or how many body-worn cameras were purchased during the reporting period. The second set of questions are narrative questions. These are qualitative or open-ended questions about the program goals and objectives. Since they're open-ended, they can contain both numbers and text. Examples are questions like what types of equipment were purchased during the reporting period, or what challenges did you face when trying to achieve your program goals during this reporting period. So these questions are really meant to help capture the full experience you're having when conducting activities with BJA funds. So we just always tell people the more information you provide, the better. Whatever you need to express to be able to answer the question helps us understand your responses. And so the quantitative numeric data helps us establish baselines to track performance against program goals, and also create a nationwide picture of the BJA program. The narrative questions give you as the grantee an opportunity to express in your own words the experiences that you're having when operating your program. And so both of these are equally important in reporting, and you should take every opportunity and possibility to make sure that you're answering with accuracy and consistency across the reporting periods. So when looking at the performance measures questionnaire, there are 6 sections total, though you only answer questions in certain sections based on the grant activity you indicate during that reporting period. So for example, if you indicate did not conduct any outreach during the reporting period, you would automatically skip over that section of the questionnaire. So the first section of the questionnaire is the award administration section. This includes questions kind of broadly about your grant activity during the reporting period, which will help indicate the sections of the questionnaire you'll answer. The second section is partnerships and community engagement, which includes questions about organizations that you've conducted outreach with and the types of outreach conducted with each of those organizations during the reporting period. The third section is the officer training section, which includes questions about the presence of training, whether or not trainings are required, the types of trainings provided, the numbers of officers trained, and the hours. The next section, the planning phase section, includes questions about the status and development of various policies and procedures as it relates to your body-worn camera program. Then the implementation phase section includes questions about the deployment of body-worn cameras, the addition of any personnel as part of the program, and any internal program quality assurance procedures you have in place. The final report questions will only be answered once at the end of the grant award program and include questions about your program after the grant ends and how would you intend to sustain the body-worn camera program. And then the goals and objectives section is the semi-annual question section that you'll answer only in January and July report periods, which would be questions such as what goals do you hope to achieve with your funding, or what challenges are you experiencing during the previous reporting period. So again, you don't necessarily answer every single question in all of these solutions. You'll move through the questionnaire, and the questions most applicable to you are the ones that you'll be answering. So you can find more information about the performance measures on BJA performance measure site, which you can access using the link we provided here. That site will take you to the BJA program as a whole. So you'll want to then find the BWC pilot implementation section of that page, where you'll find 3 attachments that might be useful to you. The first attachment, which is a PDF titled FY 2021 BWC Program Performance Measures. This is the questionnaire that will be required whenever the program moves to just grants. Again, that's not happening quite yet, so this is really just a preview of what the questionnaire will look like when we transition to that platform. The second PDF, which I think is the most valuable resource on the website, is a PDF titled the BWC Performance Measures. This is the current questionnaire that's in the PMT that you'll be using for the foreseeable future. The PDF can provide you a way to kind of view all the questions at once, so you'll have an understanding of what you might be responding to once you do go into the PMT and formally report. The third resource that's available is a PDF titled BWC Tracks Activity Tracking Tool. These are instructions for an optional tool that you can use to help you track the required PMT data that you'll eventually report during a reporting period. So the goal of this tool is just to help you so that you don't have to go back and gather all the information after the fact. It can help you track the information as you move through the reporting period. But again, it's optional. We encourage you to take a look at it and see if it would be helpful for you, just as a tool to help you keep track of this information. So next we'll talk about tips for successful reporting and some frequently asked questions we've had about reporting over time. So to introduce this section, I first want to tell you a little bit about what we at BJA do to ensure and enhance data quality. So BJA's Planning, Performance, and Impact team, which I'm a member of, conducts quarterly data verifications. What this means is once you've submitted your quarterly performance measures questionnaire, we go through and review the data to assess data consistency and accuracy. If at any point we identify an issue, our team then reaches out to grantees to help work through any potential issues and encourage grantees to review and revise entries to ensure good quality data. Another way that BJA enhances data quality is through site visits. So BJA grant managers conduct site visits where they can assess the data accuracy by identifying documentation and support PMT data entries for major activities. So that's really what BJA does proactively to help ensure the quality of data that's being reported. One of the most frequent questions we get is what to do you get to a question that doesn't apply to you or you're unsure how to report on a required measure. So questions in the system have mandatory require responses. And if a question does not apply to you, maybe because you didn't have grant activity in the previous reporting period or is not something you've proposed as part of your program, we suggests that grantees then enter a 0 when they get to that question, and then provide an explanation with additional comments section once your report is complete. And so you can see this screenshot here on the slide is what it would look like when you get to the end of your report. And you can click on that blue add comments box, which will allow you to submit additional comments to explain why you were not able to provide data. Brief descriptions here are completely acceptable. So it can be as simple as we're still in the planning period of our grant, or there was no activity during the previous reporting period. Those are sufficient responses. But by providing this information and improve data quality by helping us understand what the meanings of the zeros are when reported in the system. Another way that we help ensure data are being reported consistently is that many of the questions in the BWC performance measures questionnaire are related. So during the data verification case, we also examine these related questions to ensure consistency. So here's an example from the outreach and community engagement section. Question 2 asks whether you've conducted any outreach during the reporting period. If you answer yes to that question, then the next question will ask you to identify which criminal justice organizations or agencies you conducted research with and the types of outreach that were conducted. So in other words, if you answer yes to question 2, then you would be answering question 3 as well. And as data analysts, we'll double check that. And if for some reason it was either missed or we think there was any inconsistency, again, we reach out to the grantees to help address any of those issues and get them corrected in the system. So to wrap up this section, I just want to quickly review some tips for defining goals and objectives. So it's important to write well-defined goals and objectives to help clarify your priorities and highlight criteria for success. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the SMART mnemonic, which walks you through the important dimensions of a good goal or objective. So the SMART mnemonic stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so we recommend using this process when setting your goals to help you clarify the scope of your priorities and give you a way to reevaluate your goals per year when you submit those semi-annual narrative questions to determine whether your goals should be updated. Maybe you've achieved them and need to set new goals, or you've run into some challenges and need to adjust the goals as they are. It gives you an opportunity to use data to understand your progress and make course corrections as needed. So again, as you're thinking about as you plan before submitting your performance measures questionnaire, and even when you're in the system, just remember the SMART mnemonic and try to develop goals using this process. Just to kind of highlight that SMART goal process, we have a couple examples here of how you can adjust goals to make sure they're a SMART goal. So first, you might know that a goal for your program is to buy body-worn cameras. But that as a SMART goal, you might instead you want to improve public safety by equipping all officers with body-worn cameras. That gives you much more specificity and a way to measure your progress towards that goal. Another example is you might say test body-worn camera effectiveness. A better way or a measurable way to say that is that you might evaluate the effectiveness of body-worn cameras in increasing safety. It just helps you to be more specific in your goal setting so that you can then back over your achievements. Another one is write policies on body-worn cameras. You might say more specifically, produce three policies governing use for storage and dissemination of body-worn cameras and reported videos. And lastly, you might know a goal is to store body-worn camera data. Instead, you might say assess the capacity for data storage and integration. So these are just some examples and a way for you to kind of review the way in which you write your goals to ensure that they're kind of set to that SMART mnemonic and help you develop achievable and measurable goals. And so just to kind of give you an overview of how the BWC program data are used and the types of information we can report on, we want to show you some data from the previous years that to give you a sense of how the program's been operating. And then also we'll end with some resources of where to reach out to if you have questions. So this first figure shows the funds awarded by fiscal year. So you can see across the previous 6 fiscal years, there's been a range of funding awarded from anywhere from $12 million upwards to $23 million awarded by fiscal year. In fact, you can see that the last 2 fiscal years have seen some of the largest amounts of funding provided by BJA to the state and local grantees, which I think is a great sign for this program and really helps you see the impact that this program can have across the fiscal years. The second one shows you one of the main measures in the performance measures questionnaire, which is the number of cameras purchased using the program funds. So this figure shows the number of cameras purchased during the last five year. So in fiscal year 16, which was right at the beginning of this program and when it started, you can see that there were over 8,000 cameras purchased using program funds. Since then, you can see there's been quite an increase, which is a great sign. And in the most recent fiscal year, there were almost 12,000 body-worn cameras purchased using program funds. So again, having these consistent performance measures across fiscal years helps BJA and the grantees kind of track the use of the program funds and how they're being used in the field. So another important element of the performance measures questionnaire is about training. And one of the questions is asking about the number of officers who have received formal training as part of the body-worn camera program. And this figure shows that number across the fiscal years of the program. So again, you can see that when the program first started in fiscal year 6, or when it was in operation in fiscal year 16, there was over 10,000 officers that received formal body-worn camera training as part of the BJA grant program. And again, since then, we've seen a very beneficial jump in the number of training provided and officers trained, with anywhere between 18,000 to 26,000 officers trained each fiscal year program. Another benefit of these data is, in addition to being able to provide information across fiscal years, we can also look at specifics within a fiscal year to kind of track kind of more detailed or specific oriented information and dive deeper into the data for a particular fiscal year to learn about how the program funds were used. So in fiscal year 20, last year's fiscal year, there was over, the previous slide showed there was over 18,000 officers that received training. Then we can look at what types of trainings were conducted during that fiscal to understand how those officers were trained. So I do want to know, I noticed a typo last night as I was reviewing this, so I apologize. The label on the bottom should say the number of trainings conducted, not the number of officers trained. That was what the previous slide was about. So you can see here that field, classroom, and web and computer-based trainings were most used during fiscal year 20. But in this annual and academy trainings were also fairly common, at least reported, which is especially, important to know considering the pandemic last year, to see that there was still a variety of training going on to help ensure that officers were being trained on their body-worn cameras. For the other category, some of those that were reported last year were one-on-one training, video trainings, and field training, or not field training, that's that category, or conference-style trainings. So that also gives you an opportunity that if your program uses a type of training that isn't listed here, a way for you to report that information to us. Again, there were diverse types of officers training during fiscal year 20, and kind of gives you a highlight of how we can dive into more specific data for each fiscal year. And so to end, I just want to provide you with the BJA PMT Help Desk contact information. This is a great resource for any questions you might have about the performance measures reporting process. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, except for federal holidays. We're closed on federal holidays. Our team strives to return emails and phone calls within 24 hours. So if you come across an issue outside of our office hours, please don't hesitate to leave a voicemail or an email. Our team will get back to you once we're back in the office. So I think there's a fair time at the end of this where I can answer any questions you might have. But I do believe, as I mentioned before, this presentation will be made available to you so that you can have all the information to reference back at a later date when you need it. But on behalf of the BJA and performance measures team, I want to thank you for your time to help you if you run into any issues during the reporting process. We want to make it as easy and as possible to help you. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Amy, for your presentation. And we did actually receive a question in the chat. So we have a question. So do the numbers on the slide about the training, so do they reflect actual training or proposed training?
I tell you what, Jessica, I'll handle that question since there seem to be technical difficulties for Amy here. So yeah, the PMT data is just an ongoing report of progress. As Amy indicated, it's reported on the form quarterly. So any of the data that you see regarding training and other sort of, I'm trying to remember some of the other, yeah, so the hours of training, the number of officers that were trained would reflect the training to date. So we'd expect that to be lower for 2020 grantees since they're still implementing their programs. You know, it varies on when they do training. Sometimes they'll wait till they get the body-worn cameras to initiate training. And so if they haven't procured the cameras yet, there would be a lag in training, so that wouldn't be reported yet. So, and the same would hold true for the body-worn cameras purchased. If they're early on in their grant process, they haven't purchased body-worn cameras yet, it wouldn't be reflected in those charts. Or if they're buying body-worn cameras in a staggered manner, it wouldn't show up until the quarter where they purchase those cameras or deploy them, whatever the case might be. So it's a dynamic report.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. So again, if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to place them in the chat box. And Amy has sent me a message that if there are any other questions, it would be good for you to place them in the chat. John, did you have anything you wanted to mention about PMT?
Sorry about that. I think Amy covered it very well. You know, unfortunately, we had some audio problems, but I believe that the slides themselves sort of convey pretty much what she said. So I don't have anything to add. I would add that this is that, make sure that your internal communications are sort of maintained. I think sometimes what we find is that there are people who are wearing different hats in the organization. So as I alluded to in previous discussions, there may be a lieutenant or a captain or a sergeant who's working with a TTA provider and knows what's going on sort of on the streets. That information should get conveyed to whoever the grant administrator is, so he or she knows that that information can be ingested, should be ingested into the PMT reports. I think sometimes the person who's doing the PMT report is the same person who's doing the fiscal and other project reporting, and they may sometimes take their best guess at what's going on in a larger department if they're not in touch with the person who's implementing the grant, sort of the sergeant, the lieutenant, or the captain. And that often is the case in large agencies where they're managing, maybe dozens of federal grants. And so communication, I think, between the internal stakeholders within the agency that received the grant is important.
Thank you. Well, in the absence of any other questions, I believe, unless anyone else has anything that they would like to say, I'll give it just maybe a couple more seconds to see if any other chats would like to come in. But then we can go on break.
I want to give people a little bit of a break. They've been attending for 2 days, 2.25 days now, I guess 2 afternoons. Just, yeah, it does dovetail with our discussion, particularly Tom Woodman sees about how some of the data might be better exploited, leveraged for different purposes. Right now, there's agencies that are struggling with just managing the data, but we hope as we move forward that agencies will be able to leverage the data more effectively for some of the types of things that Tom's team presented on yesterday, including investigations. So we don't want the data to just exist in storage. We want it to be used within reason without snooping without going on fishing expeditions, for instance, for officer discipline, but to improve performance. So it'll touch on some of that, but it'll just touch on how agencies are dealing with the tsunami of digital evidence and what we're learning as to be emerging best practices. So with that, I'll let people have some time to themselves. Thanks so much.
Thanks. We'll see you all back here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.